Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now we're going to talk about drugs, and we're going to come at it from an angle that I don't think that we've actually examined together before. It speaks to an observation that we've both made in the past, and that is the example I always use. I don't think it's even there anymore. The nightclub used to be popular with the young royals, and whenever we were discussing stop and search, and a police officer would ring in to tell me that they would search the pockets of young, often black young men in some of the poorer parts of town, hoping usually to find cannabis or small amounts of Class A drugs. And I have often observed, as have you, that if they were to embark upon similar missions in the night spots of London's more glamorous postcodes, the King's Road in Chelsea, Knightsbridge in London, I refer to my own sort of hometown, as it were, so I know that there are equivalents in other cities as well. They'd find a lot more, both in terms of quantity and quite possibly quality. They would find a lot more. You grab someone by the ankles and dangle him upside down at 3 o'clock in the morning in the middle of Chelsea, and you are probably going to find several grams of cocaine falling out of people's pockets. But that's not a priority for the police, and I've often wondered why. So too now has Simon Kempton, who's the drugs lead for the Police Federation of England and Wales. He said yesterday at the Police Federation conference in Birmingham that middle-class users were arguably more damaging than low-level street users because they supported the organised gangs that import drugs for enormous profits. So the argument is that wealthy middle-class drug users who take cocaine recreationally are fueling a deadly knife crime epidemic. You know that knife crime has rocketed. You know that everybody now accepts that it is linked in large part to a reduction in police numbers. But if you go to the source and you try and eradicate the reality that causes the crime, then you'd be looking at the people taking the drugs. And in the case of cocaine in particularly, those people are likely to be much wealthier than street-level dealers and your average addict. So the suggestion is that resources might be better used targeting wealthy drug users. I don't know quite who's best qualified to talk about this, to be honest with you. I'd like, if I can, but it may involve you sort of compromising yourself. Obviously, you don't have to use your real name or anything like that. I'd like, if you can, to hear an explanation of the sort of chain of command, as it were, because most middle-class, actually even upper-class people I know who have taken cocaine or who have bought cocaine or who routinely buy cocaine, and I'm sort of going back a few years now in terms of my own social life. There can't be a show business editor on Fleet Street without coming across this stuff. But it would usually involve a telephone transaction. People would ring up a dealer who would then deliver cocaine to their home or to their party or even, I think, to their office. So there's automatically a divide between that and street dealing. I think the question I'm trying to ask is, how does that create knife crime? So if Thomasina and Rupert have got a number for someone who will deliver high-quality cocaine to their Knightsbridge pied-à-terre within 20 minutes of receiving the call, how does that dealer, how is he involved in the knife crime world? It's almost as if I see two separate worlds of drugs. The one that is street level, and I think this is me being a bit stupid. There's the street level one where kids are stabbing each other to protect their right to sell drugs in that relatively small corner of the town. Is that right? I mean, that's why a lot of this crime happens. This is our patch, get off it. But when the Sloane Rangers, when the Toffs put in a call to their man, and he comes around to their flat and drops off their gear, how is that part of the same world as the street crime? I'm presuming that it is, because I kind of think that the Police Federation's lead on tackling drugs is going to know a lot more about this than I ever will. But I'd love to get a slightly better grasp of the actual facts on this one. I don't know if you're going to be able to help me. So the drugs come into the country That's where the real money is, of course, and they will be some extremely well-connected people quite often, because you've got to have a large amount of money to invest in the first place. So the drugs come into the country. Some of them end up being sold, as you might say, on the streets, and that's where the knife crime comes in. Some of them end up being sold via telephone transactions and deliveries to the wealthier middle-class clientele, customer, user, criminal, let's not forget. And I just want you to describe the differences, the divisions between those two worlds. Am I making sense? I think I am. 0345 6060 973. And then we might look at what we would do if we were to take this seriously, because it's a bit like fair trade food, you know, or provenance of other goods or animals, how they're kept and slaughtered. Because how much do we care if we are buying cocaine about the fact that we are sustaining and essentially supporting criminal culture in a country like Colombia that leaves countless people dead every year in the most hideous of circumstances? That is the extreme example of why middle-class cocaine users are responsible for terrible, terrible things happening on the other side of the world. But they're also responsible here. So I just wonder, I don't really know anyone in this world anymore. But I don't know, has anyone ever sort of thought, do you know what, I'm probably not going to take cocaine again, because not only am I entrenching poverty and violence in a country like Colombia, whence it comes into this country ultimately, but I'm also causing criminality and carnage on the streets of my own city. I just want to understand the link better. And I mean, no apologies for not really knowing the first thing about these supply chains in this. So I suppose we'd have to call it an industry. So I get the phone lines open. You don't have to use your real name. I'm not going to sit in judgment on anybody today, because if I did, then I wouldn't get the illumination and the explanation that I'm looking for. So 2 questions. How does it work? Is it true that Rupert and Thomasina buying 5 grams of coke on a Friday night in their Knightsbridge flat and having it delivered by a fella on a moped, how is that linked to the world of knife crime and street-level drug dealing? I don't think that's a stupid question. It might turn out to be. In which case I'll think of another one. 11:13 is the time. Phone lines are open. 0345 6060 973. And the second question really is, how would you do it? How would you go about it? If we take Simon Kempton's advice to heart and try and address the deadly knife crime epidemic by targeting wealthy middle-class drug users, if you're a police officer or thoughts, I'd love to know how you'd do it. How would you get this sort of tactic in place? How would it work operationally? You can email, you can tweet at Mr. James O'B. I've just sent out an appeal on Twitter for Kieran to get in touch, because I want to follow him on Twitter, given his deep understanding of customs union-related issues. And I know a lot of you feel the same. So if he does see my appeal, then I shall retweet it, and I'll retweet his reply, and you can pile in and follow him as well. It's just coming up to 11:14. Darren is in West Norwood to kick us off on this slightly strange, but I suspect important inquiry. Darren, what can you tell us?
Hello, mate.
Hello, Darren.
I was a very heavy cocaine user for years and years, to the point where it started destroying my life and my family.
Yeah.
And I thought the best way that I could deal with it and stop was to give every number I had in my phone. I had about 10 coke dealers' numbers.
Yeah.
And I could get a gram of coke delivered in 15 minutes. And so I rang the police and I gave them every phone number I had.
Well, as a sort of form of extreme rehab type of thing. You thought, if I give all my dealers' numbers to the old Bill,
all these numbers to the coppers,
I won't be able to buy any, even if I want to.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Crikey.
And this was about 5 years ago, dealing.
We had to dump that for bad language, so we'll just back up a bit, and it's all right. Not everyone's on the radio every day, and I swear like a trooper when the microphone's off, so don't feel bad about it, but just people will have missed what you said. So you gave all the numbers of all the dealers that you used to the police, because you figured if they all got arrested, you wouldn't be able to buy anything off them, and that would help you to knock it on the head. Then what happened?
And every one of them is still dealing. The police didn't. They wrote the numbers down apparently when I rang them, but they didn't follow it up. Or they're still dealing.
Well, that proves the point of the fella, really, doesn't it? Saying that they arguably are targeting the wrong people.
Well, if a cokehead rings up the police with 10 coke dealers' numbers, why haven't they stopped it?
Well, there'll be all sorts of reasons, as you know. Not least, it actually would be quite a... It wouldn't be that difficult an operation. Ring them up, say, I'm a mate of Darren's. Oh, no, we can't do that because you'd get into bother. But you could do so. You could imagine them doing something. Well, do you understand, briefly...
It was all localised in one area.
No, I get that. And someone else can answer the question of why the police wouldn't do it, because I don't know, and nor do you. But do you understand what the relationship is between those people who you would ring up and they'd deliver to you, and the younger people that are sort of stabbing each other on the streets?
Yeah, the relationship that I know they would have had is, say I had 8 dealers' numbers.
Yeah.
You'd get a text message saying, this is from so-and-so, ring us up, we've got the best gear in the world. And then what happens is you'll get a text from someone else with the same name, and what happens is that they'll get people at knife point and take their SIM cards, and they'll steal the SIM cards because it's got all the users' numbers on it.
Blimey.
You know what I mean?
I think I do. This is... there we go, we've dipped our toe.
The fact that where I'm from... this was a few years ago, a guy pulled up.
Yeah.
He delivered 4 grams to someone, and they pulled a knife on him, grabbed hold of his phone. Well, yeah, and that was the end of it.
Are you clean now?
I am. I still drink a bit too much, but at least I'm on the gear.
Nobody's perfect, Darren. Mind how you go. 11:17 is the time, and, well, the education has begun. We're examining calls by a very senior police officer with responsibility for drugs policies to his suggested that middle-class cocaine users should be targeted a lot more stringently as a way of ultimately reducing the deadly knife crime epidemic that has been so prominent in the news recently. And by not complete coincidence, because I see him every day, but my friend Juan, who comes in to sort of clean up the studio during the breaks, came in during the break we were just in then, and he is Colombian, so it occurred to me that it'd be stupid not to sit him down and ask him about how the cocaine trade here has affected your home country of Colombia. How bad is it? What sort of impact has it had?
Well, James, it's been really bad through the years. You know, it was bad when, for example, Pablo, everyone knows about Pablo was
Escobar.
Around.
Yes.
It was really bad, and I think that after he left, everything started changing for the worse in Colombia, because, you know, police and the government started tackling, you know, all these big drug dealers. And they stopped most of these big drug dealers, but now all these big ones are getting into little ones because people is making so much money out of drugs.
And they're all killing each other to protect the market.
Yeah.
How do you feel when you sort of wealthy Londoners who phone up their dealer and get delivered cocaine, it doesn't cross their mind, does it, that cocaine started life, as it were, in your country that has been in many ways crippled by this trade?
Yeah, well, you know, you sometimes don't even blame the people, because they don't even think about what is happening after they have their first line of cocaine, you know. But it's not just violence. It's been changing the Colombian culture. A lot of people has been changing it because, you know, people see all these big guys as influence.
Yes.
So the younger generations,
they want to be like a gangster.
They want to be like a big guy that is gonna go and get his money, not working hard for it, but instead of doing a few business and getting rich. So it changed the mentality of people. It changed the mentality of girls. That, you know, they want to look nice because they want to go and hang out with the guys that are dealing with the drugs. And, you know, it's something that is, you know, I think it's been getting worse. Even the police has been tackling on these guys. The cocaine trade is affecting everything, from government to the, you know, to the poorest people in the country.
I hear you, and you're right. We don't give it the thought that we need. I don't know if we're going to make a regular habit of this, mate. I might sit you down, and we could have a feature. We get a theme tune. What does Juan think about it? What did we think about it? But I'm really glad you were here today.
All right, mate. Thanks a lot for
hey,
thanks,
anytime.
mate.
You know
Thanks,
that.
James. See you later, mate. Bye-bye.
Hit by dint of being Colombian and in the room by coincidence as well. It'd be great if that happened every day. Someone just wanders in who's in a position to give us a really useful insight into the story that we're discussing. 23 minutes after 11. Can we clip that and make sure he gets a copy as well? You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Martin is in Hoddesdon. Martin, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, yeah, basically, James, as an ex-user of the drug for over 30 years.
Crikey.
Yeah. I'm now clean 3 years, completely clean from
Well
coke and drink.
Well done, mate.
Basically, listening to your radio all the time regarding this subject, obviously I've got quite a strong view on it.
Yes.
You're talking about does it connect the sort of the violence with the dealing. Well, the situation is this. I mean, I've lived at sort of East London. I've lived up the West End when I was wealthy. You know,
Yeah.
I've lived in both parts. And what happens is if someone's selling a bit of gear in, let's just say Kensington on a Friday night, which is, very well known for it. But basically, if someone else comes in and starts selling gear, and the quality of the gear is a little bit better, people switch dealers. That's what happens, yeah?
Right.
It doesn't matter. There's no such thing as your regular dealer. I mean, I didn't have 10. Some blokes had already had. I mean, I had so many numbers on the phone. I mean, you could walk into a major superstore, you can walk out of the park and get a wrap of coke. It's that rancid. But the point I'm making is that once someone else comes on someone's territory,
Yes.
people are going to start losing money. It's going to create friction. It's going to create violence. I've not experienced it, but obviously because a man of 30 years plus, I've
Yes.
seen things and other things. It's got worse. Obviously got worse over the last 3 or 4 years. But the thing is, there's so much money involved in the white powder that people are willing to take a risk. They're willing to do violent things because if they can earn 1,500 quid, £2,000 on a Friday night, and someone comes along from out of the patch and steps on their toe, there's going to be problems. It's not going to go away as quick as people think it is because from East London to South Kensington, it's rancid.
And how interconnected is it all? Because I hadn't thought of this, and in a way it's obvious, but it needed someone like you to take the lid off. So if someone is dealing, they're going to be of interest to somebody else who would like to do those deals, someone who would like to make those money, and they're going to know who the other person is, and they're going to use, as you've suggested, violent means or whatever in order to steal their customers, to move in on their clientele. And that,
Yeah, I mean,
how does that lead downwards towards kids, young people stabbing each other on the streets?
Well, what I've seen, I mean, I'm a man of 56, unfortunately, but what I see going away through the 30 years, which is quite a long while, is someone else said, you're a man that works on a radio station, the one of your claim made a good point, right? When kids of a young age see these films, documentaries, the Ferraris, the watches, the women, the nightlife, the lifestyle,
right.
They want a piece of the action. So what happens is, the main dealers at the top, I mean, obviously I'm not going to go into who they are, who they ain't, because it's not in my nature to do that, but the main people at the top, from my knowledge of being a user for 30 years, is they go around looking for people that are looking for a better lifestyle, and what happens is it goes down the chain. So basically what happens is you're going to get people that are working in South Kensington, they're charging £200 a gram for a gram of coke after 12 o'clock, and in East London they're charging £100. So what happens is, the question you're asking me is, how does it affect kids and stabbings? Because, like I say, the lifestyle, the money, the ambience of it all, and what they don't...
So they just move up. They move up the social ladder, then?
They move up in the ranks. They move up from a street corner outside of a well-known...
So the dealers will be... They'll have the same source for their drugs, and some of them will be selling it cheaply in East London, and some of them will be selling it expensively in Knightsbridge, but they'll be buying it from the same people.
It's going to come from the same source, but basically these younger kids are apprentices. I say that in a respectful way, and no means to anyone that's doing that. But basically, they are sourced from the lower end of the council estates, where I come from myself as a kid, until the houses in St John's Wood that are 10, 12, 15 million.
And that will be just a horses for courses type thing, because some kids are not going to be able to walk into a £15 million house in Hampstead and walk the walk and talk the talk and make the clients feel comfortable, but some kids are, and they're the ones that end up doing those jobs.
Well, that is correct. I mean, when you're going up to the higher end of London, up the West End, etc., you are correct. I mean, you're going to get... I mean, the dealers that I've used and dealt with over 30 years, they have... I'm not going to be rude to this, but they are all higher. They are aristocratic people, but believe me, they are very, very, very high up in the chain. So when people always target people from East London and rough areas and say, the drug dealers... No, listen, you go around Chelsea, Kensington, Holland Park, I know the areas, I lived there, there's plenty of aristocratic people that are very, very, very well connected in the cocaine business, and they know exactly what's going on, I know what strings to pull, I know who to phone to get the job done if things go wrong.
I hear you. And then that might be part of the reason why they're not being properly pursued, because, of course, there is a weird deference in this whole country, but particularly sometimes it seems in the areas of of law and order. Martin, well done. Well, can I ask what made you stop? Did you have a moment, or was it just an accumulation
Well,
of...
I mean, basically 30 years of using the drug.
Yeah.
I won't go into it, it's going to take too long, but I was a rich man at 30, and basically I got to a point when I couldn't function. I mean, it's embarrassing to say it on the radio, but I'm going to say it. At the worst point of my life, I was spending £12,000 a month on coke.
Shut up.
No, yeah, I was, yeah. I lost my family, ended up in prison, lost my business. So I've been clean 3 years. It took me, I nearly overdosed, but I managed to just survive it. I don't know how. And I basically got clean myself with no help. I've done it myself.
Well done, mate. Better late than never, eh?
Thank you very much, sir.
Cheers, Martin. Mind how you go. It's 29 minutes after 11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A lot of you suggesting that my friend Juan joined us a moment ago should have got a Ray Liotta, and now, no doubt, lots of people thinking Martin should as well. I can't dish him out like sweeties, but you're probably right. I should have dished out a couple more today. It's too late now. I am less confused than I was about how the relationships emerge, how the link between young people getting stabbed on the streets in poor parts of town lead ultimately to rich people buying coke in the better parts of town. What would happen if you went after the users then? What would actually happen if the police started shaking down every Rupert, Thomasina and, insert another posh name, Tristan, Quentin, I don't know, James? What would happen? How quickly would things change? That was an astonishing call. I'm a little bit shell-shocked by that. £12,000 a month. Darren's in Bromley. I don't get this, mate. I'm going to level with you. Do you know how many white coke dealers I know who don't go around stabbing people? Why are you guys trying to correlate this stuff with young black boys? I'm really tired of LBC. It's turning bigoted, one-sided and agenda-based against young black men. I'm never listening to you guys again. I'm sorry to hear that, because you won't hear this, but I don't think we've mentioned colour today, have we? I can't claim that I've been desperately careful not to, but I was thinking much, much more about wealth and social class. And obviously, people of colour are still statistically more likely to be at the wrong end of the socio-economic stick, but it's the poverty that drives the criminality, not the ethnicity, mate. And if you think that I'm on the wrong side of that argument, then you clearly haven't been listening to LBC very closely for the last few years. 11:35 is the time. Senior police officer suggests go after the wealthy cocaine users to cut the knife crime. And I'm clearer now on where the links are, but I'm not entirely clear on how going after the wealthy cocaine users would stop young people trying to become drug dealers from stabbing each other. I'm closer, but not over the line yet. So keep calling. Jay's in Greenwich. Jay, what would you like to say?
Hello.
Hello, Jay.
Just to answer sort of your question, what you generally find is that the drugs that are generally associated with gangs tended to be sort of your street drugs, so crack, heroin, cannabis, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Cocaine's always been sold on the street, but generally speaking, it's been sold with a lesser purity and for not that good money. Generally, they were pushing crack and heroin and cannabis. But what's happened is that as and those sorts of dealers tended to be locked out of wealthier markets, so those that they would access through like pubs or bars or nightclubs. But what you find now is that because you're able to purchase stuff online, it's all anonymised. What you're finding now, a lot of those gangs are moving into those sorts of markets, and they've got greater access to people. They're not accessing fixed. They don't have to go into fixed locations. And what you generally tend to find is that, depending on the source, whether they're selling it upmarket or they're selling it down market, purity is generally the same. Now they just water it down and cut it according to the market. In order to establish a market, they simply sell higher purity stuff at a cost which might undercut people in those more wealthier markets, and they establish a client base that way. And then what you generally find is that as those markets tend to emerge, they still hold on to their street level dealing as well. But it is, as one of your callers just mentioned before the break, you see people, rival gangs will see that they're making money. They'll see that they're doing things on mopeds and they're delivering uptown.
Yes.
As well as
and they want a bit of that.
and they just want, it's simply, they want a piece of that. Or what you generally find as well is a lot of these gangs through county lines, they will, your wealthier southeast counties, they will generally just go and take over those markets, and they will do that either by violence or through other means.
Threats.
And they will just take over those markets, and now they've got access to a broader range of clientele, if you want to call it that. And that's generally how...
And then that explains, that unpicks a lot of the stuff that we've been puzzling over. I have to do this, mate. You are either a dealer, a massive user, or a police officer.
I'm the latter.
That's a relief. Although, having said that, Martin was fascinating. What would happen if people like you started going after the middle class, the wealthier users? Would it have a meaningful impact on the street level violence?
It would do, but it's a question of gangs by very nature have always tended to be very territorial. So an emerging market where it's delivery based is a lot harder to take over than if you're dealing from an estate or a localized area. So it's a question in terms of how you target resources. It's about sort of threat and harm and risk. So if dealers are fighting each other or stabbing each other over land, over territory, then you kind of have to focus your attention there. But there is undeniably an emerging link between wealthier clientele and gang dealers,
yes,
because of the fact that they're able to establish markets and access those customers in a way which they traditionally haven't been able to.
I followed you. Yeah, I'm following you. So because what you've done is give us both the reasons why there are links and the reasons why there are divisions in the two types of trade, haven't you?
Yeah, effectively. I mean, street dealers will they've got a steady client base. They, in terms of when they're dealing, say, from an estate or a localized area, they're established in that area.
Right.
But there's an emerging market whereby they are able now to access wealthier customers in more prestigious areas, and it carries less risk potentially.
Yes, and potentially greater rewards as well. And
greater reward because you're then able to sell it at a higher price.
Until someone finds out what you're doing and decides that and so that's where the threat, that's where the danger comes in. So I'm sorry to sort of go round in a circle, but from what you've said, there would be results to be had from going after the users, the wealthier users, but not in a way that would rewrite the rules of policing gang activity and drug dealing.
There absolutely would be reward in it, and you would start to impact, if you did target it, this emerging market. I mean, you can buy drugs now through dating websites.
How do you mean?
For example. So somebody will create a profile on a dating website, and certain code words, etc., are used within it, and you can simply do it that way. And if you're using end-to-end encryption, and I'm not going to go into the tactics too much, but there are ways of doing it which people are more sort of doing to a greater degree nowadays, and it's an emerging market, and they're able to access people that they've never traditionally been able to access because they were locked out of nightclubs in the West End or certain pubs or bars. Now they can just go anywhere. And I mean, dealers have always delivered, but it's just how they're doing it now, and the ease and the access to which they're having. And then again, you have territorial rival gangs that see what people are doing, and they simply target other drug dealers or those gangs because they want to take over those markets, whether they're street based or branching out to sort of drugs to order.
I hear you. And so, crikey, it's a bit like that old Greek myth, isn't it, where you chop one head off and two more, is it the Hydra, two more heads grow in its place. It's almost impossible to know when to start. If I was in charge and I was looking for a quick result, then I'd get 100 of you and your colleagues to be trying to score. And then when the person turns up to deliver, put your trousers on, you're nicked.
Yeah.
Why doesn't that happen more? Bodies.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I don't know. There are plenty of operations which are targeted in and around the West End, for example, around pubs, clubs, bars. I've been involved in many of them.
Okay.
So they do occur. But yes, you are right. Generally speaking, you have a affluent middle class who aren't touched. And that's not unique to British policing. It happens all across the world.
And why do you think that is? If indeed you have a view on it, because I don't. I mean, Brian has suggested it's because they're more likely to be Tory voters, but I don't think we're going to bring up political tribalism quite that far into the conversation,
No,
Brian.
I don't think it's that. But you generally find that policing activity always tends to be in poorer neighbourhoods, because that's generally where you find higher crime rates.
Because so you've got a bunch of toffs taking a load of coke, but they're never going to actually start killing each other. Whereas people at the other end of the socio-economic ladder who value their own lives less. That's always the point people miss, isn't it? They value their own lives less because they have less to live for. They're more likely to pick up a knife over a 200 quid drug dispute, whereas the people at the other end of town can write off 200 quid and not even notice that it's gone missing.
Yeah, you'll have operations which are specifically targeted around drugs and drug dealing and working up the chain in order to get people in middle markets and above. But generally speaking, the vast majority of people who are picked up for possession of drugs generally tend to be your lower level drugs, and they tend to be in higher crime areas where there is a lot of policing activity anyway, and the fact that they've been picked up with drugs is as a byproduct of the fact that police generally focus their attention in high crime areas. It's not that these people are specifically necessarily being targeted.
But there's more crime going on in those postcodes.
There's more crime going on, and you are therefore likely to pick up more people in possession of drugs because you're stopping and searching.
Except, my old line, and this has been influenced and improved a lot by a conversation I had with the writer and musician Akala recently, except that if you actually measure crime, as opposed to violent crime, if you just measure the crime of possession or dealing drugs, you're going to find a hell of a lot more spilling out onto the King's Road at 3 o'clock on a Saturday morning than you are in a lot of parts of town where stop and search was endemic.
Absolutely. But as I said, it's where, so you'll find the officers that might police the King's Road at 3 in the morning won't be looking to target drug dealers because they've all in custody dealing with prisoners for other offences.
Yeah, I kind of get it, but it is why if you were being stopped, I think Sajid Javid's just made some comments about stop and search while we've been speaking. Actually, remarkable show today. It's revolving at speed, but you would, of course, if the real reason why you think stop and search is important is to find drug dealers, then you would be doing it all over Chelsea with, and I think we will bring class into it rather than colour, with wealthier people, so the appetite isn't there. 11:46 is the time. Possibly one of those days where we're going to end up putting the whole show on the Clips page. But if you do want to, like me, follow Kieran on Twitter, the caller who really schooled us all. Schooled, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? The way that schooled has become a negative word. Schooling. You know, when you say he got schooled, and it means he got shown up or embarrassed, whereas actually the idea that schooling someone is a bad thing is possibly part of all the problems that we're creating for ourselves at the minute. We got schooled. We got educated by Kieran because he works absolutely at the coalface of import-export between the European Union and the shortly-to-be non-member of the European Union, currently known, although for how long remains to be seen, as the United Kingdom. So, but anyway, I've tracked him down, or rather he's got in touch on Twitter, and I've retweeted his tweet. So if you, like me, want to follow him for updates on the reality of international trade, for a small British business, then he's your man. Check it out on my Twitter feed at Mr. James OB. It's 11:51. We are talking about drugs at this hour and have been similarly schooled and or educated, and it's brilliant. We've spoken to long-term user who's actually written a book about it. He was too modest to say so, but Martin, who ran from Hoddesdon, the man who at one point was spending £12,000 a month on cocaine, has written a book called Clean. If you want to find out more about him and about his journey, then those would be your Google terms. He won't mind me saying that, would he? I can't imagine he would. He'd be glad of the business, I hope. And then we had Jay, who's a police officer in this field. In fact, everyone's been better qualified than me, which, to be honest, I'm not embarrassed to say, when it comes to cocaine and hard drugs, it wouldn't be hard to be better educated than me. Adam's in Islington. Adam, what can you tell us?
Hi, good morning, Jim.
Hello,
I'm a first-time caller.
You're very welcome.
And I'm a bit nervous.
It's only me. It's only me.
So what I wanted to tell you is I'm a full-time Uber driver, and I do about 60 to 80 pickups every week.
Gosh.
And I get these middle-class professionals that do cocaine a lot in the back of my car.
Really?
Probably I get about 10, 15 a week. And,
So around 10% of what you're, or more, of your journeys.
Yeah. If you
Okay.
tell them to stop, then they tell you to,
Mind your own effing business.
Yeah.
But you can give them a bad Uber rating, though, can't you? I don't use Uber. Nothing personal to you, Adam, and I wish you well with the work that you do. But you can, if someone uses cocaine in the back of your car, can't you give them a bad rating?
But the issue is, what are they going to do about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, let me tell you something else. The deepest problem. At some point, I think it was about 3 months ago, I picked up, I got a job, so I went to central London. I picked up a pizza.
Yeah.
And I picked up a pizza, and this pizza was going near Chelsea. So this influential area, very nice, big building.
Yeah.
And I was a bit curious, so I opened it. I swear to God to you, there was about 10 grams of cocaine underneath the pizza. And I just acted like everything was normal and delivered it. So I've done...
You've got to be careful, my friend. You could get done for that, you realise?
That's exactly what I'm saying to you. So these criminals have started outsmarting the police and providing big chunk of, Class A drugs through Uber. So without realising, I became a drug dealer.
Well, no, except you weren't a dealer because you weren't getting any money out of it except the fare on your Uber journey. You were a sort of trafficker, really.
Yeah. Also, when you think about it, in London, there are a lot of people working in professional jobs, in especially financial industry, and these people take Class A drugs like there is no tomorrow.
Yes, I'm not completely naive. I feel every one of my 46 years today, but I'm well aware of that, and it's been like that for 20 or 30 years. But I hadn't obviously been made aware of the Uber connection. What would you do? I mean, if it happened again, would you? No, I don't want you to incriminate yourself or something. But who would you report it to?
Who would you report it to? No one.
I know.
There's one of those problems that, you can't tell the police. If the police sees, if a police sees a guy in a suit, wearing probably a £500 suit, walking down the street, are they going to search him for cocaine? I don't think so. They might go after someone who's wearing a hoodie in a council estate rather than someone who's walking down Moorgate, just finished work at 5 o'clock, going to a pub.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the real problem. And these people are financing a killing of young people on the street.
They're a level down or 2 levels down. So it's ugly, isn't it? So going after the wealthy users will affect some of the senior players, but it won't necessarily make the junior players any safer because they're playing the same game on a slightly different pitch.
Yeah. Also, when you think about it, a lot of young people that are working on the street, they really don't make that much money. The money's at the top level, with the working class, with the middle class and the wealthy, because they can consume cocaine. A cocaine costs about 70, 80 quid a gram in London. What kind of working class can afford that? I work a whole day and I make about 100, 120 a day. I won't be able to consume a gram of cocaine every day, can I?
No.
Yeah, that's the main problem.
And that's the deal that these people see in their minds as they compare your hard graft, in my view, underpaid, and they see enormous rewards in return for very little effort, but very, very high risk. And then what happens is you end up with the very low rewards and the very high risk when you pick up that pizza.
Yeah. Also,
so you've got to be careful. Promise me you'll be careful, don't you? Because if you get pulled over, if you've got a dodgy tail light, they pull you over and they find 10 grams of coke in the back of your car. That doesn't. I mean, you can tell them where you picked it up, but you're also exposing yourself to potential prosecution.
Yeah, also, if you look at the Uber app, they won't be able to go and trace it and establish someone, because all you need is an email address and a telephone number and a dodgy.
It could be a throwaway phone.
Yeah. I mean, that's the dilemma at the moment. Also, like the political establishment, they don't look at these kind of problems, because how can you prosecute a people who are in your own circle? I mean, bankers.
Is that how you feel? You think there'd be a... Because I have to tell you, I got into trouble at public school, and the drugs officers that came into our school actually seemed to relish feeling the collars of posh boys. So I don't... I mean, that's an experience from, 28 years ago, so it might be out of touch, and it was in the north of England rather than in London. But you feel, you would argue, or you believe that police, particularly CID, are less likely... Because I think you're right, they are less likely to go after wealthier people, but that's because wealthier drug users are less likely to be committing other crimes, particularly violent crimes. It's the dealers that will be doing that, and the lower down the chain you go, the smaller the distinction comes between the user and the dealer. There you go.
Yeah. That's the issue, because
it is, isn't it?
Okay, if you look at the hierarchy, so let's say I'm a wealthy businessman that consumes, let's say, 5 grams of cocaine a day with my friends.
Yeah.
I can afford to buy a gram, let's say £100, £500 a gram.
Yeah.
And someone delivers to my house, and I can consume that cocaine. There's no problem, right?
Yeah.
But the person that gets that money from the wealthy person, they're going to purchase with 500 quid, let's say about 10, 15 grams, and give it to those young people to go and sell it on the street. Right?
Yeah.
So these young people that sell on the street, they're going to be fighting with other young people over their turf and territory. I mean, these things do have knock-on effects on people that are in lower class, because...
Well, it's as clear as night follows day when you put it like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really is.
These people do have connection to the violence that are happening in council states, stabbing that's going on.
Clearly. Flipping out. 2 things, Adam. First up, thank you. Second up, what happened to your nerves?
Pardon?
What happened to your nerves?
I've been listening to you for a very long time. I think you gave me the confidence.
Oh, it's very kind of you to say so. Unfortunately, I can't say to you what I would say to a black cab driver at this point, which is I look forward to ending up in the back of your car one day. Although I have to say that when you remind me of the work you put in and the wages that you get at the end of it, I do think it's very important to restrict criticism of Uber to the business practices and the people running it. Also, just a clarification on that other amazing caller, Martin. His book is called Get Clean, and his writing name is Martin John. So amazing calls, although I sense that you might start getting a bit tired of me saying that every day. So what we need is some really rubbish calls, and then I won't be able to go on about how brilliant the calls have been, and you won't get bored with me telling you how brilliant the calls that you've already heard have been. Great.